Hello everybody, very little intro required on this one. So this is where we left it off in part 1, where I attacked it with the tips that I got sent. So these ones here, and they didn't do a good job. So we are going to, from here, if you notice all that pitting, that's what this tip was actually meant to get rid of. And that is what I know the Nova equivalent to that point, which is the black 280 grit. I know that this can get rid of that pitting, so I'm quickly going to flash forwards after I've gotten this down to a more reasonable level. I might do the brown as well as the black, but most likely it'll just be the black. And then we're going to go back to this tip and run through the other Chinese Nova point substitute tips that I've got. And we're going to see if they can at least get a polish. If they can't, we already know they can't deal with this kind of diamond bit scratching and pitting, but can it replace maybe half the Nova tips that I've got and still end up with a reasonable polish? So that's today's test, just to see if there is any kind of use at all. Flash forwards to now, and this is what we've got. We zoom right in. You can see I've done a bit of a rush job on it, but you can see that it's more that foggy looking texture rather than the pitted look. So all I've done is gone through and used the black and then the brown. God, my brown is getting dirty. Black and then the brown Novas, and we've gotten to this point here, so your typical frosted glass look. I've just been focusing on the side with the purple flash. I'll just give that a wet. There you go. So now we are going to go for a take 2 and run it through this Chinese gambit again. So 240, 400, 600, 800, 1000. And we'll see if they can at least take it from here and finish up with a polished little piece. It's not insane quality piece by any means. It does have a nice little purple flash on it. It's a dark crystal, but I haven't cut it into a really nice shape at all, and it's got a little bit of faceting to it just because I didn't spend much time with the black and browns, but you can say that the shape has changed a fair bit. So the black and browns could change it, and the brown is a 600 grit, so this 240 I was hoping would do just as well, but it really did nothing but polish the only outer surface that it could reach. But now, without the massive deep diamond bit scratches, we're going to see if it can get us any closer to a polish. I'll be damned. Those tips are not useless. Who would have thought? They can actually get a bit of a polish done. And it's really confusing. So you can see here that it's a fairly nice blue flash. The surface is still fairly uneven. I think I might have to spend more time with the brown Nova and possibly switch over to the grey as well, and then switch over to these, which seems a bit counterintuitive since the grey is a 1200 grit Nova and the first Chinese tip is 240. But what I've found has been pretty interesting actually. So the 240 and this 400, you saw they're pretty useless. They fall apart really quickly. Grinding wise, they can't shape. They're literally reminiscent to using diamond paste and a felt or a wooden tip. That's the kind of feel you get out of them. They have the same kind of effect too. They're just kind of polishing the surface, but they're not really cutting. For 240 grit, you're not really looking to polish at that stage yet, or at least I normally aren't. So, disappointing tip. 400 behaved exactly the same. Fairly disappointing tip. But once we got to 600, 800 and 1000, something changed dramatically. You saw that they were falling apart far less. You can see here that it's still not deformed at all. It's even got all the machining marks of when it was made. It wasn't falling apart, and it was behaving much like I would expect a Nova tip to behave. Sure, it's only a 600 grit and it behaves kind of like the 3000 grit Nova, but it doesn't fall apart and it does its job. It was noticeably polishing the stones, and then same goes for the 800 and the 1000. The 1000 probably degraded more than the 600 and 800. I'm not entirely sure why. It comes in this little plastic container, which makes me think it might come from a different supplier. But all in all, it's confusing the hell out of me. The only thing I can put it down to, if I compare the two, is that perhaps the diamond grit in this one is so large that it's starting to destabilize the actual silicon carbide kind of resin that they're using to hold the grit in place. So this is a bit crumbly just because it's been so heavily impregnated with diamond grit, which is why it kind of acts like a diamond paste. It just kind of comes off and you just grind away and the tip disappears really quickly, and you just keep the diamond paste on there for as long as possible. You'll notice I wasn't dunking the opal so much to wet it, I was dunking the tip. That was because my idea was to keep the diamond paste on the opal for as long as possible, just like you would when you're using diamond grit. You don't want to just chuck the diamond grit on, spin the bit up against it for 2 seconds, then dunk it in the water and wash all the diamond off. You kind of want to keep it there and you want it to actually do something. So that's what I put it down to. I reckon that the grit, there's just too much of it, and that it's too coarse for this material to kind of hold together. Whereas once you hit 600, the diamond grit is a lot finer and there's a lot less of it, or at least I'm assuming there's a lot less of it. I guess just because it's finer, it's getting a nicer bond, and the piece is actually holding together really well. So amazing. In essence, that makes me think that though it's not a complete Nova replacement, it may be able to replace that higher end of Nova. So really, I reckon you can get away with not buying the grey and the rose, or any of the higher ones above that, unless you really want something that lasts a long time and that you don't need to buy too often. But these seem to do a pretty good job, a comparable job, and I think these are like 20 cents each, apparently. So I don't know the supplier myself, but I can easily find out. And I don't know, if you just want to buy two Novas, the black and brown, that should get you to a point where you can switch over to this. I might have to have a bit more of a play because the surface isn't quite as nice as I would have liked. It does look like it's lacking that grey 1200 grit Nova. So maybe you still need to use the grey and then just skip the rows and go straight into these. But you can get a pretty good polish. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. They've got their place, but really they're only good for polishing. They're not good for getting rid of deep scratches. I can still see some in there. I mean, I've made it so that it's pretty clear the boundary between where I actually spent time and where I haven't spent time. But yeah, the tips are not a complete waste of time. So I think I might actually use these every now and then. Especially for maybe Boulder, where I do worry that my Novas get a little bit dirty, but it's just a cosmetic thing. It wears out and gets clean over time anyway, so it's not a huge issue. Maybe it's something to think about if you're really strapped for cash and you don't want to commit to the full range of Novas. But I think you're going to have to at least get the black and brown. I might have been able to spend more time on the brown and get this to a level that I would have liked. And maybe it replaces the grey and pink. It still saves you 40 odd bucks AU, and instead you just buy a couple of these. They seem to last a long time at this grit, so buy a couple of these from 600 and higher and maybe use these instead. Who knows? I don't think I personally will, because I am a big fan of my Novas and they hold together and they do get a slightly better result. But if you're willing to sacrifice a little bit of the quality of the Novas, maybe this is worth pursuing. So I'll leave that up to you guys. I might go dig up the supplier and try to find them myself so that I can pass on the links to you guys, and yeah, it's something to think about. So I'll leave it there and see you in the next video.